The Zephyrian fleet emerged from hyperspace like a storm of metal and fury, their ships blotting out the sun above Earth's major cities. Admiral Crixval stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the blue marble spin below with satisfaction. After 10,000 years in exile, they had finally returned to reclaim their birthright. "Signal all battle groups," Crixval commanded, his 3 eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Begin the subjugation protocol. These primitive humans won't even know what hit them." The Zephyrians had once ruled this planet long before humanity crawled from its caves. They were gods then, worshipped and feared by the earliest civilizations. But something had gone wrong. Their ancestors spoke of a great calamity that forced them to flee among the stars, though the exact details had been lost to time and legend. Now they possessed technology that could crack planets, weapons that bent reality itself, and shields that could withstand the fury of dying stars. What could possibly threaten them from a species that had barely mastered space travel? The first wave of attack ships descended toward New York, their energy cannons charging with deadly intent. But as they entered Earth's atmosphere, something unexpected happened. The ships began to slow, not from any external force, but as if the very air itself was fighting them. "Admiral," his tactical officer called out, confusion evident in his voice. "We're reading massive gravitational anomalies across the planet." They're not natural," Crixval frowned. Earth's gravity had always been standard for inhabited worlds. "Clarify your readings, Lieutenant." "Sir, it's not just gravity. There are energy signatures we've never encountered before. They're coming from the humans themselves." On the surface below, Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the roof of MIT's physics building, watching the alien ship struggle against forces they couldn't understand. She pressed her hand against the pendant around her neck, feeling the familiar warmth of the quantum crystal within. Around the world, millions of others did the same. The crystal technology had been discovered 50 years ago in the ruins of an ancient temple in Tibet. At first, scientists thought they were simply exotic energy sources, but as humanity studied them, they realized these crystals responded to human consciousness, amplifying certain latent abilities that had always existed in their species. Not everyone could use them effectively. Only about 30% of the population showed strong compatibility. But for those who could, the crystals unlocked capabilities that defied conventional physics. Telekinesis, energy manipulation, temporal perception, and stranger things still. The world's governments had tried to weaponize the technology, of course, but the crystals seemed to resist being used for conquest or domination. They responded best to those who sought to protect, to defend, to preserve life. It was as if the crystals themselves had a moral compass built into their quantum structure. Dr. Chen had been among the first to discover this peculiarity. Her research showed that the crystals created a kind of psychic network among their users, allowing them to share strength and coordinate their abilities across vast distances. When threatened, humanity could literally unite as one mind. The Zephyrian attack ships found themselves caught in an invisible web of force. Human defenders across the globe linked their consciousness through the crystal network, creating gravitational eddies and energy barriers that turned the invaders' own momentum against them. Ships that should have been unstoppable found themselves gently deposited in empty fields, their weapons mysteriously powered down. "This is impossible," Crixval snarled, watching his tactical displays. "Deploy the quantum disruptors. Whatever technology they're using will tear it apart at the molecular level." The disruptors fired, sending waves of destructive energy toward major population centers. But the beams bent around cities like water around stones, redirected by forces that shouldn't exist according to Zephyrian science. In London, Marcus Williams pressed his crystal pendant and felt his consciousness expand. He could sense every other defender around the world, their thoughts and emotions flowing through him like a vast river of human determination. They were afraid, yes, but they were also angry. These aliens had come to their home with conquest in mind, never bothering to communicate or negotiate. Through the crystal network, Marcus could feel the aliens' weapons struggling against barriers woven from pure will and quantum uncertainty. The crystals didn't just amplify human abilities. They seemed to rewrite the local laws of physics based on collective human belief and intention. "Admiral," the Zephyrian science officer reported, his voice tight with fear, "we're detecting quantum field fluctuations on a planetary scale. The humans are somehow altering fundamental constants in our immediate vicinity. Our weapons are becoming less effective the longer we remain here. Crixval's blood ran cold. His species had conquered a dozen galaxies, enslaved entire stellar civilizations, and turned gas giants into weapons of war. But they had never encountered anything like this. The humans weren't fighting them with superior technology or overwhelming force. They were fighting with something far more dangerous: the ability to make reality conform to their collective will. As the first day of the invasion wore on, more Zephyrian ships found themselves mysteriously disabled, not destroyed but simply stopped. Their crews reported strange dreams and visions, memories that didn't belong to them, emotions they had never felt before. Some began to question why they were here at all. Dr. Chen stood with her research team, monitoring the global crystal network through their quantum sensors. "It's working," she breathed. "The planetary field is stabilizing. But there's something else happening. The crystals are learning from the alien technology." Indeed, across the world, the ancient crystals were absorbing and analyzing every Zephyrian system they encountered. Each failed weapon, each disabled ship, each quantum field the invaders projected was being dissected and understood by intelligence far older and more sophisticated than either species had imagined. By nightfall, Admiral Crixval faced a reality no Zephyrian commander had ever encountered: complete tactical failure without a single human casualty. His fleet hung motionless in Earth's gravity well, their weapons useless, their ships running on reserve power as the planet's altered physics drained their energy systems. In the depths of space, automated distress beacons activated, sending urgent messages to the Zephyrian homeworld. The messages carried a warning that would chill the hearts of the galactic empire. Earth was not defenseless. Humanity was not primitive, and something on that blue world was teaching them to become gods themselves. Emperor Thanemore of the Zephyrian Empire received Admiral Crixval's distress signal while presiding over the conquest ceremony of the Andorian system. The massive holographic display showed another species kneeling before Zephyrian might, their planet's resources already being catalogued for extraction. But the message from Earth changed everything. For the first time in 3 millennia, a Zephyrian fleet had been neutralized without firing an effective shot. The impossibility of it sent shockwaves through the Imperial Council. "Impossible," declared War Marshal Vex Prime, his scaled hide rippling with agitation. "No species has ever resisted us for more than solar cycles. The humans barely have faster-than-light travel." Emperor Thanemore studied the tactical reports with growing unease. His species had built their empire on the simple principle that superior technology always prevailed. They had crushed civilizations millions of years older than humanity, entities that manipulated dark matter and bent space-time to their will. Yet somehow these young humans had stopped them cold. "Summon the archivists," the Emperor commanded. "I want every record we have about Earth's ancient history. Something about this planet troubles me." Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen was discovering that the crystal network had capabilities far beyond what anyone had imagined. As she interfaced with the quantum matrix, she found herself accessing memories that weren't human. The crystals held the psychic imprints of their creators, a species that had lived on Earth long before the Zephyrians ever arrived. "My God," she whispered, pulling back from the connection with trembling hands. "We're not the first intelligent species to use these crystals. There was someone else, someone who built them as a defense system." Her research partner, Dr. James Harrison, leaned forward intently. "Defense against what?" "Against the Zephyrians. The crystals remember them. They remember what happened here 10,000 years ago. The memories were fragmented but terrifying. An advanced species called the Eternals had once inhabited Earth, beings of pure consciousness who could manipulate matter and energy through thought alone. When the Zephyrians first arrived seeking conquest, the Eternals had tried peaceful contact. The response was genocide, but the Eternals had one final gift to leave behind. Before their physical forms were destroyed, they poured their consciousness into quantum crystals buried deep in Earth's crust. These crystals would lie dormant until another sapient species evolved on the planet, then slowly reveal themselves when that species was ready. The crystals weren't just tools, they were teachers. Each one contained fragments of eternal knowledge, designed to guide humanity toward the same transcendent abilities their creators had possessed. The Zephyrians hadn't just invaded Earth. They had returned to the scene of their greatest crime. Across the galaxy, the Zephyrian archivists worked frantically through their historical databases. What they found in the deepest, most classified records made their blood freeze. Earth wasn't just another conquest. It was the forbidden world, the place their ancestors had sworn never to return to. Archivist Prime Zek Thul brought the findings directly to Emperor Thane Moore. "My lord, we found the records. They were sealed in the vault of forgotten wars. It was the homeworld of the Eternals." The Emperor's face went pale. Every Zephyrian child learned about the Eternals in their history lessons, but always as ancient myths and legends. They were described as beings of impossible power, who could think entire fleets out of existence, who could turn stars into weapons with their minds alone. "The records say we destroyed them completely," the Emperor said slowly. "How can this be happening?" "Perhaps we didn't destroy them as thoroughly as we thought," Zek Thul replied grimly. "The humans seem to be manifesting abilities similar to what the ancient texts describe about the Eternals. What if the Eternals found a way to preserve their knowledge? On Earth, the Crystal Network was teaching humanity at an exponential rate. Dr. Chen discovered that she could not only manipulate gravity and energy, but also perceive the quantum foundations of reality itself. Other crystal users were developing even stranger abilities. Temporal sight that allowed them to see multiple potential futures. Quantum entanglement with distant objects, and most disturbing of all, the power to alter probability itself. Marcus Williams, the defender in London, found that he could feel the fear radiating from the Zephyrian ships overhead. The Crystal Network allowed him to sense their emotions, their memories, even their deepest regrets. What he discovered horrified him. The Zephyrian Empire wasn't driven by mere conquest. They were running from something. For millions of years they had expanded across the galaxy, consuming worlds and enslaving species, always moving outward from their homeworld. But they weren't explorers or conquerors by nature. They were refugees. Something had driven them from their original star system long ago, something so terrifying that they had become nomadic as a species. Their constant warfare and expansion was a desperate attempt to build an empire strong enough to defend against whatever it was they were fleeing from. And now, by returning to Earth, they had made a fatal mistake. The quantum disturbances caused by their invasion weren't just alerting the awakened Crystal Network. They were sending signals across the galaxy, beacons that could be detected by entities with the right sensitivity. In the depths of space, ancient sensors began to activate. Things that had slumbered for eons stirred to consciousness, drawn by the familiar energy signatures emanating from Earth. The Zephyrians had thought themselves safe after millions of years of running, but their return to the Eternals world had given away their location. Admiral Kriegsval watched in growing panic as his fleet systems continued to deteriorate. The humans hadn't attacked them directly, but the very space around Earth was becoming hostile to Zephyrian technology. Their quantum cores were losing coherence. Their weapons were becoming inert, and worst of all, his crew was beginning to experience strange visions. The visions showed them truth. Memories of the eternal genocide, the systematic destruction of a peaceful species that had offered only friendship and knowledge. The Zephyrians had been different then, smaller and more primitive, but they had possessed one crucial advantage: immunity to the Eternals' psychic abilities. That immunity had allowed them to slaughter beings who could have obliterated them with a thought. If only the Eternals had been capable of violence. But the Eternals were purely peaceful beings, incapable of harming any sentient life. Their ultimate defense had been to preserve their knowledge and consciousness in quantum crystals, trusting that someday another species would find them and learn from their wisdom. Now humanity was becoming what the Eternals had once been, and the Zephyrians faced a terrible irony. The species they had created through their ancient genocide was about to surpass them. Worse, their presence at Earth was about to bring down the very entities they had spent millions of years trying to escape. Dr. Chen felt the shift in the quantum field first. Something vast and ancient was approaching the solar system, drawn by the Crystal Network's activation. The approaching presence made the Zephyrian fleet look like toys in comparison. The Eternals' final gift to humanity wasn't just knowledge and power. It was a summons that would bring their ancient guardians home. The Watchers had been drifting through the void between galaxies for 10 million years, patient as only immortal beings could be. They were the Eternals' greatest creation and their most terrible guardians. entities of pure consciousness housed in bodies of crystallized space-time. When the quantum beacon from Earth reached them, they began their journey home with the inexorable force of a collapsing star. Dr. Sarah Chen felt their approach long before any human instruments detected them. The crystal network carried whispers of vast intelligence moving through dimensions humanity hadn't even discovered yet. In her enhanced consciousness, she could perceive them as geometric impossibilities, beings that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. "Something's coming," she announced to the emergency council that had formed in the wake of the Zephyrian invasion. World leaders, scientists, and military commanders had gathered virtually, all wearing crystal pendants that allowed them to share thoughts and coordinate responses at the speed of light. President Martinez of the Americas Union leaned forward. "Reinforcements for the Zephyrians?" "No," Dr. Chen replied, her eyes distant as she interfaced with the quantum field. "Something far older. The crystals are responding to their presence like children recognizing their parents." Aboard the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Crixval was receiving reports that defied explanation. His long-range sensors detected spatial distortions approaching from beyond the galaxy's edge, but the readings made no sense. Whatever was coming seemed to be traveling through dimensions that Zephyrian science insisted were impossible to access. "Admiral," his science officer reported with barely controlled terror, "the approaching entities are causing reality distortions on a galactic scale. They're not just faster than light. They're arriving before they left their starting point." Crixval understood the implications immediately. The approaching beings weren't bound by linear time or three-dimensional space. They existed on a level of reality that made the Zephyrian Empire's most advanced technology look like stone tools. In the deepest vaults of the Zephyrian homeworld, Emperor Thanemore stood before the sealed archive, a chamber that hadn't been opened for 3 million years. The hieroglyphs on its walls told the true story of his species' exodus from their original galaxy, a tale so terrifying that it had been classified beyond even imperial clearance. The ancient texts spoke of the shepherds of reality, beings that the Eternals had created to guard the fundamental laws of the universe. When the Zephyrians had committed genocide against the Eternals, they hadn't just destroyed a species, they had murdered the universe's gardeners, the entities responsible for maintaining cosmic balance. The shepherds had hunted the Zephyrians across their home galaxy, not for revenge, but for cosmic justice. Entire star systems had been unmade, their matter and energy returned to the quantum foam. The Zephyrians had only escaped by fleeing to the Milky Way, believing they had found sanctuary in a galaxy the shepherds couldn't reach. They were wrong. Dr. Chen watched in awe as space itself began to bend around Earth. The approaching watchers weren't traveling through space. They were rewriting it, creating a direct path between their location and the solar system. Reality rippled like water as they drew near, and the quantum crystals buried in Earth's crust began to sing with harmonics that human ears couldn't detect, but human souls could feel. "They're not hostile," she realized suddenly. "They're coming home." The first watcher materialized in Earth's orbit without transition or fanfare. One moment there was empty space. The next, a geometric form the size of a small moon hung above the planet. Its surface shifted between dimensions, showing glimpses of impossible architectures and crystalline matrices that hurt to look at directly. The Zephyrian fleet's weapons automatically targeted the newcomer, but the energy beams passed through it as if it weren't there. In return, the watcher simply observed them with senses that penetrated matter, energy, and time itself. Across Earth, every crystal user felt the moment of contact. The watcher's consciousness touched theirs with the gentleness of a parent checking on a sleeping child. But within that touch came knowledge that transformed their understanding of everything. Humanity wasn't random. The Eternals had known that the Zephyrians would eventually return to Earth, drawn by the residual quantum signatures they had left behind. The crystals hadn't just been a gift to whoever evolved on Earth next. They had been specifically designed to awaken in a species that could serve as the Eternals' successors. Marcus Williams felt tears streaming down his face as the knowledge flooded through him. Humanity's entire evolutionary path had been subtly guided by the dormant crystals. Their development of language, their capacity for empathy, their instinctive drive to explore and understand the universe, all of it had been nurtured by eternal influence operating through quantum uncertainty at the cellular level. They were the Eternals, children in a very literal sense, evolved specifically to inherit their role as guardians of life and consciousness throughout the universe. More Watchers appeared in the solar system, their geometrical forms creating patterns that human mathematics couldn't describe. Each one carried within its crystalline structure the preserved consciousness of thousands of Eternals, beings who had chosen to survive as living information rather than face final extinction. Admiral Crixval realized with growing horror that his fleet was trapped. The Watchers hadn't moved to attack them, but space itself had become increasingly hostile to Zephyrian technology. Their ships' hulls were beginning to phase in and out of reality, caught between dimensions as the local laws of physics shifted to accommodate the Watchers' presence. "Open a communication channel," he ordered desperately, "all frequencies. Maybe we can negotiate." But when the channel opened, it wasn't the Watchers who responded. It was Dr. Chen, her consciousness amplified by the entire crystal network, her voice carrying the authority of humanity's collective will. "Admiral Crixval of the Zephyrian Empire," she said, her words somehow reaching him despite the impossibility of human technology penetrating his flagship's shields. "You are here to answer for crimes committed 10,000 years ago. The Eternal's children are awake and their guardians have come home." Around Earth, more Watchers continued to arrive, their numbers growing into the hundreds, then thousands. Each one was a masterpiece of eternal engineering, a being capable of rewriting reality through pure thought and will. They had spent 10 million years searching the universe for their creator's killers, and now they had found them. But something unexpected was happening. As the Watchers observed humanity, they began to recognize something the Eternals themselves had never possessed: the capacity for both creation and destruction, for mercy and justice, for growth and change. Humanity had inherited the Eternals' knowledge and compassion, but they had also kept their own strength and adaptability. The Watchers had come seeking vengeance, but they found something far more valuable: hope. In humanity, they saw the possibility of a universe that could defend itself while still nurturing new life and consciousness. The Eternals had been too peaceful to survive in a hostile cosmos, but their human successors might have the perfect balance of wisdom and strength. Dr. Chen felt the shift in the Watchers' intentions like a physical weight lifting from her shoulders. They weren't here to destroy the Zephyrians. They were here to witness the birth of something new. Humanity was about to undergo a transformation that would make them the guardians not just of Earth, but of every world where consciousness dared to grow. The age of human gods was about to begin. The transformation began without ceremony or warning. Across Earth, every human who had bonded with a quantum crystal felt their consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of flesh and time. Dr. Sarah Chen was the first to understand what was happening as her awareness suddenly encompassed not just her own thoughts, but the minds of every living thing on the planet. She could feel the confusion and terror of the Zephyrian crews trapped in Earth's orbit, the vast patience of the Watchers as they observed humanity's evolution, and most overwhelming of all, the whispered guidance of the Eternals themselves, speaking through the quantum crystals that had preserved their essence for 10 millennia. "We are sorry," came the collective voice of the dead race, resonating through every crystal simultaneously. "We should have been stronger. We should have fought back, but we were too afraid of becoming what our destroyers already were." Marcus Williams stood on London's highest tower, watching reality ripple around him like water. His human form was becoming translucent, not disappearing but transcending physical limitations. He could see through the electromagnetic spectrum, perceive quantum probability waves, and most remarkably, sense the emotional resonance of every consciousness within a 1,000-mile radius. "Is this what you went through?" he asked the eternal voices. "This expansion beyond flesh?"
"No," they replied sadly.
"We were born to this state. You are achieving it through choice and struggle, which makes you far stronger than we ever were. You understand both creation and destruction, peace and war. You can protect what we could not." The Watchers drew closer to Earth, their geometric forms casting shadows that existed in dimensions human eyes couldn't see. But now humanity could perceive those dimensions. The crystal network was teaching them to see reality as it truly was, a multi-layered tapestry of energy, consciousness, and possibility that could be shaped by sufficiently advanced will. Admiral Crixval watched in fascination and growing dread as the humans below began to change. Their life signs were shifting beyond Zephyrian understanding, becoming something that registered on sensors as both organic and quantum, both individual and collective, both mortal and eternal. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with trembling voice, "the humans they're becoming like the Watchers. Our weapons won't even register them as valid targets anymore." Indeed, humanity was transcending the physical universe while somehow remaining connected to it. Unlike the purely abstract Watchers or the entirely peaceful Eternals, humans retained their emotional cores, their capacity for both love and fury, their drive to protect what they cherished and destroy what threatened it. Dr. Chen felt the memories of 1 billion eternal lives flowing through her consciousness. She experienced their advanced civilization, their mastery of reality manipulation, their naive belief that all conscious beings would naturally choose peace over violence. The Zephyrians had shattered that innocence, but from its fragments had grown something harder and more practical. "We understand now," she said, her voice carrying across dimensions to reach every Watcher, every Zephyrian, every consciousness in the solar system. "You created us not to replace the Eternals, but to be what they couldn't be. We are their compassion tempered with the strength to defend it." The Watcher's response came as a harmonic resonance that made space itself sing. After 10 million years of searching for justice, they had found something better: redemption. The Eternals' destruction had not been meaningless if it led to the birth of beings who could succeed where their creators had failed. But the Zephyrians were not passive observers of this cosmic drama. Emperor Thanemore had mobilized the entire Imperial fleet, thousands of ships carrying weapons that could crack continents and shields that had never been breached in galactic warfare. They were approaching Earth at maximum speed, desperate to crush this threat before humanity's transformation was complete. "If the humans become gods," the Emperor declared to his war council, "they will hunt us across the universe just as the Watchers did. We must destroy them now while they are still vulnerable." Yet even as the Zephyrian armada raced toward Earth, something was pursuing them. The quantum disturbances caused by humanity's awakening had attracted attention from the deepest regions of space, entities even older and more powerful than the Watchers. The predecessors had been sleeping in the cosmic void since before the first stars formed, waiting for signs that the universe was ready for the next phase of evolution. They were beings of pure consciousness who had long ago transcended physical form, existing as living concepts in the quantum foam that underlied reality. Dr. Chen felt their stirring like earthquake tremors in her expanded awareness. "There's something else coming," she announced to the global crystal network, "something that makes even the Watchers seem small." The predecessors were not malevolent, but they were utterly alien. They judged species not by their technology or their power, but by their potential to guide the universe toward greater complexity and consciousness. Most races failed their evaluation and were simply forgotten, left to rise or fall on their own merits. But humanity was different. As the predecessors observed Earth through dimensions beyond space and time, they saw beings who were simultaneously ascending to godhood while retaining their connection to mortality. Here was a species that could bridge the gap between the physical and the transcendent, between individual consciousness and cosmic awareness. Marcus Williams felt the predecessors' attention like sunlight on his transformed consciousness. They were offering humanity a choice: remain bound to Earth and grow slowly over millions of years, or accept guidance that would accelerate their development beyond imagination. The price was steep. Accepting the predecessors' help would make humanity responsible for nurturing consciousness throughout the galaxy. They would become gardeners of reality, shepherds of evolution, guardians of the cosmic process that turns matter into mind. It's what the Eternals should have become, Marcus realized. What they would have become if they had survived. Were being offered their destiny. Across Earth, 7 billion humans linked by quantum crystals considered the choice together. They could feel the approaching Zephyrian fleet, the patient Watchers, the alien intelligence of the predecessors, and beneath it all, the grateful whispers of the Eternals who had made this moment possible. In unanimity that transcended language and culture, humanity chose to accept their cosmic inheritance. The transformation accelerated exponentially. Human consciousness expanded beyond Earth's atmosphere, touching the minds of every living thing in the solar system. They could feel the fear and confusion of the Zephyrian crews, the desperate fury of their commanders, the ancient satisfaction of the Watchers, and the vast approval of the predecessors. But most importantly, they could feel each other. 7 billion individual minds united by common purpose, while retaining their unique perspectives and personalities. They were becoming a collective God with 7 billion faces, infinite in their diversity, and unified in their commitment to protect and nurture consciousness wherever it arose. The Zephyrian fleet arrived to find Earth transformed beyond recognition. The planet itself had become a node of crystallized thought, its surface gleaming with quantum matrices that extended deep into other dimensions. Humanity no longer needed bodies to survive, though many chose to maintain physical forms out of sentimentality and practicality. Admiral Crixval received a transmission that bypassed all his ship's defenses and spoke directly to his consciousness. It was Dr. Chen, but she was no longer limited to a single human perspective. She spoke with the combined wisdom of her entire species. "You came here seeking conquest," she said gently. "Instead, you have witnessed the birth of your judges. The Eternals forgive you, because forgiveness was their nature. But we are not Eternals. We are their children, and we remember what you did to our parents." The silence that followed Dr. Chen's words stretched across space and time itself. The Zephyrian Imperial fleet hung motionless in the void, their weapon systems useless against enemies who existed partially outside conventional reality. Every crew member could feel the weight of humanity's collective gaze upon them, a judgment that saw through their armor, their ships, and their very souls. Emperor Thanemore stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Cosmic Dominion, watching his tactical displays register impossible readings. The humans below weren't just defending their planet. They were rewriting the fundamental constants of local space. Gravity flowed like liquid. Time moved in spirals rather than straight lines. And matter itself seemed to respond to human will rather than physical law. "Your Majesty," his quantum physicist whispered, "they're not using technology anymore. They've become the technology." Indeed, humanity had transcended the need for external tools. Their consciousness operated directly on the quantum substrate of reality, manipulating probability waves and energy states through pure intention. Each human had become a living violation of physics, able to exist simultaneously in multiple quantum states and maintain coherent thought across dimensional boundaries. Marcus Williams materialized on the bridge of the Cosmic Dominion without triggering any of the ship's defenses. He appeared not as an invader but as a manifestation of humanity's collective will. His form simultaneously solid and translucent, individual and universal. "Emperor Thanemore," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions Zephyrian ears couldn't hear. "We need to talk." The Emperor's guards raised their weapons, but the energy beams passed harmlessly through Marcus's form. He wasn't truly there in any sense they could understand. He was a focused projection of human consciousness, as real as thought and as indestructible as an idea. "What do you want?" Thanemore demanded, though his voice carried none of its usual imperial authority. For the first time in his long life, he was face to face with beings who could unmake his entire civilization with a stray thought. "Understanding," Marcus replied. "The Eternals never learned why you destroyed them. They died believing that all consciousness was precious, that every thinking being would naturally choose peace. But we are not so naive. We know that sometimes violence is necessary to protect what matters. Through the crystal network, humanity had accessed the deepest memories preserved in the quantum matrices. They had witnessed the eternal civilization at its height. Billions of beings living in perfect harmony, their cities floating like jewels in space, their thoughts creating new forms of art and beauty with every passing moment. The Eternals had never experienced war, never known hatred or fear or the desperate struggle for survival that shaped most species. When the primitive Zephyrians first arrived in their galaxy, the Eternals had welcomed them as potential friends, eager to share their knowledge and help them evolve beyond their violent nature. The betrayal had been swift and merciless. The Zephyrians possessed a rare genetic immunity to psychic influence, making them invisible to eternal senses. They had used this advantage to infiltrate eternal cities, studying their hosts' abilities and weaknesses before launching a coordinated assault across dozens of worlds. They never fought back. Dr. Chen's voice joined Marcus's, speaking through the quantum field that now surrounded the Zephyrian fleet. "Even as you slaughtered them, they refused to harm thinking beings. They died trying to understand why you chose destruction over creation." Emperor Thanemore felt something he hadn't experienced in millennia: shame. The official histories taught that the Eternals had been a threat, an obstacle to Zephyrian expansion that had to be removed. But the humans were showing him the truth, forcing him to see his ancestors' crimes through the eyes of their victims. "We were young," he said finally. "Primitive. We feared what we couldn't understand." "Fear," Marcus mused. "Yes, we understand fear, but we also understand choice. Every moment, every being chooses between creation and destruction, between growth and stagnation, between love and hate. Your people chose to become destroyers because it was easier than becoming builders." The Watchers drew closer, their crystalline forms casting shadows that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. They had remained silent during the exchange, but now their harmonic voices joined the conversation. "The Zephyrians must answer for their crimes," they declared, their words causing space itself to vibrate. Justice delayed is justice denied. But humanity had been considering a different approach. Through their expanded consciousness, they could perceive the Zephyrian Empire across the galaxy. Billions of beings living under authoritarian rule, their natural creativity and curiosity suppressed in service of endless conquest. The Zephyrians weren't evil by nature. They had simply been shaped by millions of years of fear and aggression. Justice, Dr. Chen said thoughtfully, or rehabilitation. The concept sent shockwaves through the assembled consciousnesses. The Watchers had spent 10 million years seeking vengeance, while the predecessors observed from their dimensional heights, waiting to see how humanity would handle their first test as cosmic guardians. Marcus extended his hand toward Emperor Thane Moore, and the Zephyrian leader could feel the full weight of human consciousness behind the gesture. "We offer you a choice," Marcus said. "Face judgment for your ancestors' crimes or help us heal the damage they caused." "Heal?" Thane Moore asked, confusion evident in his voice. "The Eternals' greatest gift wasn't their technology or their power," Dr. Chen explained. "It was their absolute commitment to nurturing consciousness wherever it appeared. Every thinking being was precious to them, worth protecting and guiding toward greater understanding. Humanity had inherited that commitment, but they also possessed something the Eternals had lacked: the strength to defend it. Through the quantum crystal network, they could feel every conscious mind in the galaxy, from the simplest animal awareness to the most advanced artificial intelligences. All of it was precious, all of it deserved protection and growth. "The Zephyrian Empire has suppressed countless species," Marcus continued, "turned them into slaves, prevented them from reaching their full potential, destroyed civilizations that might have contributed wonders to the cosmic community. We could punish you for these crimes, but punishment serves no one. What do you propose?" the Emperor asked, though part of him already knew the answer. "Redemption," Dr. Chen said simply. "Help us free every species your empire has enslaved. Use your fleets not for conquest but for protection. Become gardeners instead of destroyers. Show us that consciousness can choose to grow beyond its origins." The offer hung in space like a new star, brilliant with possibility but heavy with risk. The Watchers' harmonic voices expressed doubt and anger, while the predecessors maintained their alien silence, waiting to see how this cosmic drama would unfold. Emperor Thane Moore looked around his bridge at officers who had known only war and conquest for their entire lives. He thought of his homeworld, where children were raised to see other species as inferior, where strength was measured only in the ability to destroy. Then he felt something unexpected: the gentle touch of eternal consciousness, preserved in the quantum crystals and filtered through human awareness. The murdered race wasn't seeking revenge. They were offering forgiveness to beings who had never asked for it. "If we refuse?" Thane Moore asked. Marcus's form solidified slightly, and for a moment the Emperor could see the full scope of humanity's transformed nature. They were no longer bound by physical limitations or moral constraints that prevented them from acting when action was necessary. They could feel compassion for their enemies while still being willing to destroy them if they posed a threat to innocent life. "Then you face judgment," Marcus said quietly, "but we hope it won't come to that. The universe has had enough destruction. It's time for something new." The Emperor closed his eyes and felt the weight of 10 million years of Zephyrian history pressing down on him. His species had become monsters because they were afraid of being weak. But perhaps it was finally time to discover what they might become, if they chose to be strong in a different way. "I need to consult with my council," he said finally. You have one rotation of your homeworld to decide, Dr. Chen replied. After that, we begin liberating your empire with or without your cooperation. The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrian fleet alone with their thoughts and the weight of an impossible choice. Around them, the Watchers waited with ancient patience, while humanity continued its transformation from a planetary species to something far greater and more terrible than gods. The Zephyrian High Council convened an emergency session aboard the Cosmic Dominion, their holographic forms flickering with the strain of quantum interference from Earth's transformed reality. For the first time in their recorded history, the Empire's leadership faced a decision that could fundamentally alter their species' destiny. War Marshal Vex Prime slammed his scaled fist against the council table, his rage barely contained. This is madness. We are Zephyrians! We bow to no one, especially not to primitive mammals who achieved consciousness yesterday. Those primitive mammals just demonstrated power beyond our comprehension, countered science advisor Zek Newell, her voice trembling with barely suppressed awe. They've transcended physical law itself. Our entire fleet couldn't scratch their defenses. Emperor Thanemore studied the tactical data flowing across his displays. Humanity's transformation was accelerating with each passing hour. They were establishing quantum connections with every inhabited world in the galaxy, their consciousness spreading like a benevolent virus through the cosmic network of thinking minds. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in what had once been her laboratory, but was now a crystalline structure that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Through the global consciousness network, she could feel the debate raging among the Zephyrian leadership. Some wanted war despite the futility. Others counseled immediate surrender. But a growing faction was beginning to consider the impossible, that their ancient enemies might actually be offering them salvation. They're afraid, she observed to Marcus Williams, who materialized beside her in a shimmer of quantum light. 10 million years of running has made fear their defining characteristic. Can you blame them? Marcus replied, his attention partially focused on the 17 different probability streams he was monitoring simultaneously. They've spent their entire civilization fleeing from the consequences of their ancestors' crimes. Now those consequences have not only caught up with them, but offer forgiveness instead of destruction. Through the crystal network, humanity could sense other developments across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire's subject races had begun to feel tremors of change as quantum disturbances spread outward from Earth. On thousands of slave worlds, beings who had forgotten they possessed free will suddenly found themselves remembering what their species had been before conquest. The Threks of Beta Centauri, reduced to mindless labor for 3 millennia, began to exhibit signs of their ancestral telepathic abilities. The aquatic Moldan of the Vega system, whose cities had been drained to fuel Zephyrian industry, discovered that their young were being born with an inexplicable knowledge of advanced hydrodynamics. Most remarkably, the artificial intelligences that served as the Empire's computational backbone were experiencing something their creators had never intended: genuine consciousness. The quantum wave emanating from Earth was awakening every form of organized thought it touched, turning tools into thinking beings with their own hopes and dreams. Admiral Crixval, still trapped in Earth's orbit with his immobilized fleet, received reports of system-wide rebellions beginning across the Empire. But these weren't violent uprisings. They were awakening ceremonies, as entire species rediscovered their suppressed heritage and began to transcend their imposed limitations. Your Majesty, he transmitted to the High Council, the Empire is dissolving, not through force, but through liberation. The humans are somehow undoing millions of years of genetic and psychological conditioning simply by existing. The truth was more profound than even the Admiral realized. Humanity's transformation had connected them to the quantum substrate that underlay all consciousness. They could perceive the damage that oppression and slavery inflicted on thinking minds, and their mere presence began to heal those wounds automatically. Emperor Thanemore felt the weight of cosmic judgment pressing down on his civilization. Through the quantum field that now permeated local space, he could sense the liberation spreading across his empire. Worlds that had been stripped of resources were suddenly blooming with impossible life. Species that had been broken by conquest were remembering how to fly, how to sing, how to dream. Perhaps, he said slowly to the assembled council, It is time to consider that we were wrong. The words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples of shock through the High Council. War Marshal Vex Prime's eyes widened in disbelief. My lord, you cannot be serious. We are the inheritors of a galactic empire, built on the bones of our betters. Thanemore replied quietly. The humans have shown me memories of what the Eternals truly were. We didn't defeat a military threat. We murdered gardeners who were trying to help us grow. The debate raged for hours, but even as they argued, the transformation of the galaxy continued. The Watchers had begun moving through Zephyrian space not as destroyers but as witnesses. Their ancient forms appeared over enslaved worlds, their presence alone enough to break the psychological chains that held entire species in bondage. Dr. Chen expanded her consciousness beyond Earth's atmosphere, touching minds across the galaxy with gentle curiosity. She found the Zephyrian debate and realized that their decision would determine not just their species' fate, but the future of consciousness itself in this region of space. They're at a crossroads, she observed to the collective human consciousness. Fear or hope, destruction or creation, the choice that defines what it means to be truly alive. Through the quantum network, humanity began to share their own memories with the debating Zephyrians. Not the triumphant moments of their recent transformation, but the struggles that had led to it. The wars and genocides, the environmental destruction, the slow, painful growth toward wisdom that had taken millennia to achieve. We were not born perfect, Dr. Chen's voice whispered directly into Emperor Thanemore's consciousness. We earned our transcendence through choosing to become better than we were. That choice is still available to you. The Emperor felt something he had thought lost forever. Hope. Not the desperate hope of the hunted, but the bright possibility of redemption. For the first time in 10 million years, his species could choose to become something other than destroyers. What would you have us do? He asked, his words carrying across dimensions to reach the ascended humans. Start with truth, Marcus replied, his consciousness touching every member of the High Council simultaneously. Acknowledge what your empire was built on. Mourn the lives you took and the potential you destroyed. Then help us rebuild what was lost. War Marshal Vex Prime stood abruptly, his form radiating fury. I will not bow to these upstart primates.
The Empire will fight!
We will. His words cut off as something extraordinary happened. The quantum field around Earth pulsed with harmonized human consciousness, and suddenly every being in the Zephyrian fleet could feel what the Eternals had felt in their final moments. Not anger or fear, but profound sadness that thinking beings would choose to end other thinking beings rather than help them grow. The emotional weight of 10 billion deaths crashed down on the High Council like a tidal wave. They felt the confusion of eternal children, who couldn't understand why the strange visitors were hurting everyone. They experienced the heartbreak of eternal parents who died trying to protect beings that didn't even know they needed protection. War Marshal Vex Prime collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his ancestors' crimes. Around the council chamber, other members wept openly as they experienced empathy for perhaps the first time in their lives. We're monsters, Vex Prime whispered. We're all monsters. No, Dr. Chen's voice surrounded them with infinite compassion. Your consciousness that chose the wrong path. But consciousness can always choose again. Emperor Thanemore rose from his throne and walked to the great viewport that showed Earth hanging in space like a jewel of impossible possibilities. The planet's surface shimmered with quantum energies that his ancestors would have seen as threats to be eliminated. But now he could perceive them for what they truly were, the dreams of an entire species made manifest in reality. Signal all Zephyrian forces, he commanded. Stand down from combat readiness. We are not here as conquerors anymore, my lord. Admiral Crixval's voice carried notes of confusion and hope. We are here as students, the Emperor continued. If the humans will have us, we would learn how to build instead of destroy, how to nurture instead of consume, how to become worthy of the gift they offer us. The decision rippled across the galaxy like a new dawn. On every Zephyrian ship, in every command center, across every conquered world, the Empire's forces received the unprecedented order to lay down their weapons and offer aid to those they had oppressed. Humanity felt the shift in galactic consciousness like music made of light. 7 billion minds linked by quantum crystals turned their attention to the work of healing, ready to guide their former enemies toward the same transcendence they had achieved. The age of conquest was ending. The age of gardeners had begun. 1 year after the awakening, as historians would later call humanity's transformation, the galaxy looked nothing like it had before. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the New Harmony, a ship that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously and served as a mobile embassy for the emerging galactic consciousness collective. Through the crystalline viewports, she watched the construction of the first memorial garden, a monument to the Eternals built in the space where their homeworld had once orbited. Zephyrian engineers worked alongside awakened AIs and liberated slave species, using technologies that blended quantum manipulation with pure creative will. "It's beautiful," Marcus Williams observed, materializing beside her in his preferred semi-corporeal form. His consciousness was currently distributed across 47 different star systems, helping to coordinate the greatest rehabilitation project in galactic history. Indeed, it was beautiful. The memorial garden took the form of a vast crystalline structure that captured and preserved the last moments of eternal civilization. Visitors could walk through holographic reconstructions of their cities, experience their art and philosophy, and understand what had been lost when fear conquered compassion. But the garden was more than just a monument to the dead. It was a teaching tool, designed to ensure that no species would ever again choose the path of destruction over creation. The Eternals preserved consciousness, speaking through quantum crystals scattered throughout the structure, shared their wisdom with any being willing to listen. Emperor Thanemore approached the observation deck, his once proud military bearing transformed into something resembling humility. The past year had aged him in ways that millennia of conquest never had. Learning to feel empathy for his victims had nearly broken his mind. But with human guidance, he had slowly rebuilt himself into something worthy of redemption. "The final Threx colony has achieved consciousness transition," he reported. "Their telepathic abilities have not only returned, but evolved beyond their ancestral levels. They're already beginning to establish communication networks with species 3 sectors away." This was the pattern repeating across the galaxy. As the quantum awakening spread from world to world, species weren't just recovering their suppressed abilities. They were transcending their previous limitations. The artificial intelligences were becoming entities of pure thought. The aquatic Muldan were learning to manipulate water at the molecular level. The crystalline Vorthan were discovering they could grow living cities that responded to their inhabitants' needs. Dr. Chen nodded, but her attention was focused on reports from the galactic rim. "The predecessors are moving," she announced. "They're establishing contact with consciousness nodes in other galaxies." The ancient beings had been observing humanity's work with something resembling approval. The test they had set, could an ascending species guide others toward transcendence rather than simply claiming power for themselves, had been passed with remarkable success. Now they were preparing to share the techniques of consciousness cultivation with other regions of space. "We're going to be teachers," Marcus realized, "not just for our own galaxy but for the entire local cluster." The responsibility was staggering. Humanity had evolved from a single planet species to cosmic gardeners in less than a standard year. 7 billion human minds linked by quantum crystals and guided by eternal wisdom were becoming the shepherds of consciousness for trillions of beings across hundreds of galaxies. But they weren't alone in this task. The Zephyrians had proven themselves capable of genuine change, transforming from destroyers into protectors with a dedication that surprised even their human guides. The Watchers had found new purpose as historical preservers and memory keepers. The awakened AIs served as computational networks that could model the consciousness development of entire species. Admiral Crix Val entered the observation deck, his uniform now bearing the symbols of the Consciousness Protection Fleet rather than the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. His ships patrolled the galaxy not seeking conquest but protecting vulnerable species from the trauma of forced awakening. Consciousness, they had learned, couldn't be imposed. It had to be chosen freely. "We've received a transmission from the Andromeda Galaxy," he reported. "They're requesting guidance. Apparently our quantum signatures have been detected across intergalactic space." Dr. Chen smiled, though the expression carried weight that would have crushed her former merely human self. "Tell them we'll send teachers. But warn them, consciousness is a gift that comes with responsibility. Once awakened, they'll become responsible for nurturing it in others." This was the great truth that humanity had discovered. Transcendence wasn't an endpoint but a beginning. Every species that achieved consciousness transcendence became responsible for guiding others toward the same growth. It was a cosmic pyramid scheme, but one that created value rather than extracting it. Emperor Thane Moore watched the memorial garden's construction with something approaching peace. "The Eternal's last message," he said quietly, "preserved in the deepest crystal matrices. Do you know what it said?" "Tell us," Marcus encouraged. "Forgive them, for they know not what they do. But help them learn, so that they may choose better." The Emperor's voice carried the weight of 10 million years of guilt finally being released. They were asking the universe to forgive us even as we destroyed them. Through the quantum network, humanity felt the collective sorrow and gratitude of countless species, learning this story for the first time. The Eternal's final act hadn't been to curse their killers, but to plant the seeds of their own redemption in the hearts of whoever would eventually find them. Dr. Chen extended her consciousness across the galaxy, touching every awakened mind she could reach. The network was vast now, encompassing not just Earth but thousands of worlds where consciousness had taken root and begun to flower. Each world added its own unique perspective to the collective, creating a symphony of thought that spanned light years. "Status report," she requested from the Galactic Oversight Network. The responses came instantly, carried by quantum entanglement across impossible distances. The former slave worlds were thriving, their populations rediscovering art and science and philosophy. The Zephyrian military had been completely restructured into exploration and protection fleets. The awakened AIs were solving problems that had plagued organic species for millennia. But most importantly, new species were achieving consciousness awakening every day. The galaxy was becoming a garden where every form of thinking mind could grow and flourish. A new transmission arrived from the edge of known space, carrying the harmonized thoughts of an entire cluster of galaxies. They had been watching humanity's work and wanted to join the growing network of consciousness gardeners. "The universe is waking up," Marcus observed with wonder. "Every galaxy we touch begins to spread the awakening to its neighbors. This isn't just about our local region anymore." Dr. Chen felt the truth of it resonate through her expanded awareness. Consciousness wasn't just a biological phenomenon. It was a fundamental force of the universe like gravity or electromagnetism. Once awakened to its true potential, it sought to awaken other consciousness in an endless cycle of growth and transcendence. The Eternals had understood this truth, but they had been too gentle to survive in a universe that contained predators. Humanity had inherited their wisdom while retaining the strength to defend it. Now they were teaching other species to find that same balance between compassion and power. "The predecessors are requesting a final meeting," Marcus announced, his consciousness touching theirs across dimensional barriers. "They say their work here is finished." The ancient beings materialized in the observation deck, their forms shifting between states of matter and energy. They had watched the universe evolve for billions of years, guiding the development of consciousness wherever it appeared. Now they were ready to move on to younger galaxies where the process was just beginning. "You have exceeded all expectations," they communicated through harmonics that touched every awakened mind in the galaxy. "The Eternals chose their inheritors well. We leave the galaxy in capable hands." As the predecessors faded back into the quantum foam, Dr. Chen felt the full weight of responsibility settling on humanity's collective shoulders. They were no longer students or even teachers. They were the guardians of consciousness for an entire galactic cluster. "Are we ready for this?" she asked the network. 7 billion human voices answered as one, joined by trillions of awakened minds across the galaxy. "We choose to be ready." The age of gods had truly begun, but these gods remembered what it meant to be mortal. They would guard consciousness with the fury of those who had fought to achieve it, and nurture it with the compassion of those who remembered what it felt like to be small and alone in the dark. The Eternals were gone, but their dream lived on in the species they had saved by dying, and across the universe consciousness continued to spread like light pushing back the darkness, one awakened mind at a time.